Hi, and welcome to another demo for University of Delaware Core 3D Modeling by Mariana Williams. Today we're going to work on two different ways of modeling. We're going to work on an editable poly to create a room, and we're also going to work on soft selection to create some freeform terrain. So one is more of a geometric Cartesian way of modeling geometry. The other is more free-flowing and will allow you to create landscapes really quickly with very minimal tools. So just want to give you those two options, and let's get straight into it. Let's get right into an editable poly. So I'm going to start by creating a box, and I'm working in my perspective view right now. So I'm just going to drag and click straight in. Doesn't matter too much about the box itself. I am working in 3ds Max 2016, but the same applies to 2018 to the current version, so no worries there. So I've created my box. I'm going to hit Alt-W to switch to a 4-point viewport, and Alt-W to get back to that. It's just sometimes it's useful to work in a large screen so you can see what you're doing. Sometimes it's useful to work in a 4-panel view so that you can maybe see where things are being placed according to the top view, the perspective view, maybe from the side, so that, let's say you're animating a series of objects and you don't want them to intersect. You might want to check on if, they're moving across each other within the top view or in the perspective view, that sort of thing. So just a little helpful hint. If you ever want to switch between the default viewport, just hit the Alt key and W. So let's get on to editable poly. So I've created my box from the standard primitives, and I just want to go in and I want to right click actually this time, my box, and I want to actually convert it to an editable poly. So I'm right here, right click, convert to editable poly. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. And the minute I do that, I'm brought into my Modify tab. So I've gone from the Create panel here to the Modify tab. Exact same thing in 3ds Max 2018. So within this, I can look at my editable poly, which is my box that I've just created. And you can see these things. They're called vertex, edge, border, polygon, element. And all of these things are the sub-object level. So they're subsets of this box object that I've created within 3ds Max. And I can select different components of this box, the sub-objects. So the vertex, I'm selecting these vertices. These are the points along my object. I can select it with the word vertex or with this icon, which is the vertices, the dots here. I can also select an edge. So I'm now selecting the edge. Or I can, as you see in the sub-object rollout, the edge word is identified here. The border, this is a series of edges that are on the entire object. So I can select this entire border, if it lets me do it. Perhaps not. The face, the polygon here. I believe it's because my view is not set appropriately, but you can see that this view is set. Let me just double check that. So if you look at my box, the reason why when I selected the bounding box or the polygon faces is because if you go into the shaded view, just to take a quick look, you want to go into display selected and just make sure that this display selected with edged faces is turned on. If you're having trouble viewing anything within your sub-object panel, it's probably because display selected with edged faces is not turned on. It doesn't mean that it's not working, it just means that you can't see it. So the way to go in and really actually see that is right next to, it's within your viewport. See, we have our perspective view and our shaded view here. We're just going to go down to display selected. So I realize in 3ds Max 2018 we have a few different options for realistic shaded consistent colors. They're pretty much the same, but this display selected with edge faces is the same. So if you're having trouble with this, just make sure that's turned on. But today I'm mainly going to be working with edges to create a space and a room for my box. And we're primarily going to be working with 3 or 4 buttons here. We're going to be working with the edge sub-object selection. We're also going to be working with the ring button, the loop button, the connect button, and the chamfer settings. We're not actually working with the chamfer name, we're just working with the settings here. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to divide this box into more segments so that we can punch out some windows, maybe some doors, and then how to connect those edges so that we can create some both horizontal and vertical segments. So I'm going to go ahead and select an edge here, and I'm going to select loop. I always get loop and ring confused, so let's see if the ring works. Great. So when I select the edge and then select ring, you notice that this edge, the far edge, the bottom edge, it's basically made a ring around my object. You can look at that. You notice that all of these edges along the perimeter of my object are highlighted. Just to reiterate that, I've selected an edge here, select ring, and now all of the objects, all of the edges around my object are selected. So basically what I want to do is create a vertical segment that's sort of bounding these horizontal edges all together so that I can start to move them about and create some delineation for a window. So I'm actually going to do something, I'm going to hit this connect key now. And what that does is you can think of the connect as shaking hands between each edge. So we're drawing a knot or drawing a link between each of these edges. Maybe one way to conceptualize it is to think of if you have a roll of pencils and you're holding them in your hand and you place a rubber band around them. That rubber band is acting as the connect function. It's sort of connecting all of those pencils together and making them one unit, so one object. And that's exactly what we want right now. So I'm just going to press this connect key, and you see that, yeah, this vertical edge has appeared. And I've just done that by simply clicking the connect word. I haven't clicked the setting, I just connect the word, and it creates one edge right here, right in the center. And it creates it all the way around my box. So if I didn't want this edge in the middle of the box, I can always hit my W key, my move tool, and just move it across my box using only the y-axis. You want to be very careful not to move it by this box here. This is, say I were to move it by the box. For this purpose, it's not a good idea because it's moving it within the X, Y, and Z axis. And that's going to throw me off when I'm trying to create very consistent delineation for any sort of window or door, because, honestly, you wouldn't want your contractor coming into your house and building your house at an angle. It would fall over probably. It's maybe not such a good idea. So I'm just going to hit Control Z, get back to that. Maybe for kicks, I'll just move it over a little bit in the Y direction only. And I realized that, okay, if I just punch this square out, that's a pretty big gap for a window or for a door. Maybe I need, to chamfer this a bit, this line, so to create more segments so I can make a smaller window. So I've just hit the Q key, which is just gets me back to the normal selection level. And I'm actually going to go in here to this icon next to chamfer. Chamfer, you can think of chamfer as a word for splitting things in 2 or more pieces. So a chamfer is going to basically split this line and clone it. I'm going to go into the chamfer settings because the chamfer settings are going to give me just slightly more control over how that line is split and duplicated across my box. So I'm going to go in, hit these settings right here, and that brings up this little dialog. It's exactly the same in 3ds Max 2018. If I am to increase the number right here from 2 to 4, let's say I have 2. This is the amount of lines between my 2 red lines. And I can do that by either typing in a number, say 4, hitting enter, or you see 4 lines have appeared. I can go back to 2. No big deal. Or I can click and hold and drag that number up and down with my mouse. So a little bit easier to control. I kind of like doing that because it makes it a little more organic, a little bit more free-flowing. This number right above it is the chamfer amount. So if I click and hold again, I can see this line increasing distance and maybe making more realistic sizes for my window. So I can say, okay, well, I've dragged this number up to 19, and I still have 3 segments that the line is duplicating. I can even that out by just saying 20 units. Easy peasy, no big deal. Okay, so now that I've chamfered my segments, I still have this edge selected. I'm just going to select one edge, and last time I used the ring command to select this edge, all of the horizontal segments around my box. This time I'm going to give loop a try. So you see when I selected loop that the loop selects the entire loop around that box. So it selects those edges that I've sort of connected down along my vertical axis. What I want to do is create another horizontal edge within my box, another horizontal segment, so that I can create a window. Because if I were to, let's say, select the face here, this polygon, and just hit delete, you know, this is an opening, but in actual space, like in the world, we don't have doors that extend up to the ceiling and have no floorboards. We have actually a bit of a floor base in real life, and maybe there's some bit of geometry here. It's also kind of good practice to have a bit of a bounding, you know, between this top edge, between switching axes. You want a little bit of some sort of a plane here, however small, because it's going to help it generate a more solid geometry. So I'm just going to hit Control Z for that. Hit Q to get out of that, and I'm going to select my edge. We really just want to create a horizontal line. So if I select an edge again, same practice, select the ring command, that's going to select a ring all the way around my box, and it's selecting every vertical edge along the box. That's perfect. That's exactly what we need. So maybe you're starting to see that the process of connecting, chamfering, ringing is a similar process. So the process is you select an edge, you either select ring or loop, depending on which axis you're working from. You would then connect to create a line along the opposite axis. And with that line, you can hit the W key. You can move that up along, so say the Z axis for here. Whoops. If you ever suddenly select another edge by accident, you can just hit loop, just like what I did, and it reselects that entire loop around your box. I'm actually going to use only the Z to drag that down a bit, because I'm trying to create some windows and doors here. Drag that down, the Z axis, hit Q to get out of that. And let's say I need another bottom edge for this window, so I'm going to hit the chamfer settings, same as we did last time. I see that 3 is it's a bit too much. I'm just going to drag that down to 2. I can increase the distance between my chamfered edge by scrolling up and down. But it doesn't totally matter because I'm going to adjust it anyway manually using my move or W hotkey. And then I'm just going to hit this checkbox saying, yeah, this is fine. I need 2 edges that wrap around my box. It's enough geometry for me. This is great. Okay, so I'm going to hit the W key again. Just draw this down, create a floorboard. You notice I have 2 edges selected. I can just hit this, hit loop, drag this guy back up. I can also remove it if I need to. Just clicking remove, but you notice that when I did that, it's actually interfered with the geometry a bit. So I might just keep it steady as this. And now I have an area in which I can punch out windows or doors. So at the same time, if I'm able to take this, hit a loop again to select that entire ring, I can draw this edge out so that even if I delete a window here, there's still a bit of geometry here to keep this edge in place. And that's really important for rendering. So let's say I have a window here, this is fine. Maybe I want to create 2 windows. I'll just hit this loop again, select the whole loop. I'm going to hit the chamfer settings, maybe just chamfer once or twice. Bring this down quite a bit. You see I've got 2 edges now coming in. So I was out at 23, I was beyond these 2 lines. I just needed to actually drag down my settings until I see the lines that are now being created. I know there's 2 here, I only really need 1. So I'll just create 1. And now I can see, okay, that's a little bit more realistic for 2 edges of a window. So I'll say, okay, great. Hit Q to get out of that, and it's pretty good. So I'm actually going to select the polygon sub-object, and I'm just going to punch out maybe 2 doors. So we'll do French doors, let's say. So I can select 1 polygon face. I can hold Control and select the second polygon face, and I simply need to hit the delete key. And now I have something which resembles 2 doors within a space. So we're starting to make it look more like an actual rendering of some sort of architecture or geometry, and that's great. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so now that I have this, it looks a bit like doors for now, but most walls are not paper thin. So our model is. And one quick way to fix that is to go into your modifier list, and you just want to type in the shell modifier, hit enter, and you notice that I have my sub-object here. Above that is the shell modifier, and it gives me an inner amount and an outer amount. So if I, again, drag out this outer amount, you see that it's expanding that shell, which is simply a duplicate of the model I've created. It's sort of as though you're creating a balloon around your model, and it's giving it some sort of depth so that when we render through the model, it's looking more realistic. It's going to cast more natural light, more natural shadows. So let's go back, and we'll just say I can type in an outer amount of 1. If I control the inner amount, just to give you an idea of what it'll do, it'll actually push the walls inside the space. Too much and you get these sort of glitchy planes coming in and out. For now, I'm just going to keep my inner amount at 0. Totally cool. You can bevel the edges. Otherwise, for now, I would these are for material mapping. I would not worry about this for now. Just the simple amount is inner amount, outer amount, or if you want the edges beveled, and that's going to affect your light quality. So this is good for now. If I ever want to get back into the sub-object level, I just simply click Editable Poly, and it gets back to that. So I've got my shell, and there you have it. You have a basic idea of how to create any sort of geometric architectural structure. You can create a shell around it, to simulate a more naturalistic light, and a good idea of how to edit your poly, sort of start to punch things out and create a more realistic or believable geometry. So in the next section, I'm going to show you a little bit more about freeform modeling using soft selection. We're actually going to create a plane and create sort of a quick landscape for this box. But for now, it should give you a basic introduction to the chamfer, which is, I guess it would be all the way down. And then we have, the ring and all of that stuff. So simply by clicking, we have our chamfer, our connect, our ring, and our loop. So in a bit, let's get into the soft selection. So by doing that, I'm actually going to go back to my Create tab. I'm going to create a plane this time. And I'm creating you can really do soft selection with any object, but I'm creating a plane because it's a simple way to create this geometry. Okay, so I've got my plane, and I'm actually going to hit Alt-W again, Alt-W to get into my top view. I just want to make sure that I'm creating my plane within the top view so that I'm creating it along a uniform axis. And there's something about me, I like to see things in shaded view. Sometimes when I have a lot of cameras or objects in my scene, I will look in a wireframe view just so I can keep track of everything. But for now, I'll just create my plane within the top view, so I know it's there. And I know it's also along the 0.000 within my animation space. So I'll just hit Alt-W again. I'm in front view, I'll hit P for perspective. I'm actually going to get back into my shaded view. And I'm just going to look down at this. I've got my box that we've just created, as well as my plane. So just going to deselect plane within my create mode, hit Q, select the plane, and make sure that display selected with edged faces is on, so I can see how many segments I'm working with within my plane. And if I want to work with something like soft selection, I want a lot of segments. Currently I have 4 by 4, that's 16 segments. I might want 40 by 40 and have a lot more control over the vertices to create a more cushioned or a more realistic plane, or more realistic topography. So what I'm going to do is go into my Modify tab, and I have my plane selected. And instead of having 4 by 4, I might go in and put 40 by 40 segments. That's okay. Maybe even a little more. Maybe I want 60 by 60. And this is really your choice as an animator, as a designer, as an artist, engineer. Depending on the needs of your model, depending on how much realism you need within your plane, you might choose to have more or less segments here. It's no hard number. There's no exact number that's right. It's mainly what the needs of your model are. So if you need a lot more segments, you might have a little bit more control. For now, I'm just going to try to create some gentle flowing hills. I don't need any sort of sharp edges or peaks, so I might choose a lower length and width segment just to keep my render time down a little bit and to keep things a little bit more simple for me as I use the soft selection tool. So I've gone in and I've changed my length segments and my width segments from 4 by 4 to 60 by 60, and you see that applied to the plane. I'm just going to select out of that, select my plane again, and I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to convert it to an editable poly one more time, just like I did with my box. Okay? And you see I have the same sub-object selection drop down right here. I'm going to select my vertices this time, and you see I can select them individually. Okay, that's great. but that's not helping us. What I really want to do is I want to expand this soft selection rollout. You can find it within your Modify tab, and it's right below the sub-object selection. It's sometimes a little bit hard to see. You actually have to hit the plus sign, and you want to click Use Soft Selection. And what you see is the minute I did that, my singular red point, my red vertices, has sort of gotten this sort of halo around it. And that's great. That's exactly what I want. So right now I'm working with something called Fall Off, Pinch, and Bubble with soft selection. Now soft selection is really, it's like having a magnet around any point that you select. So if I were to increase the fall off, you see that my magnet is increasing its strength, and it's actually affecting more points. Let me just demonstrate that by trying to move these up a bit. So I've moved my fall off up from 20 units to 94 units with my W key, and I'm only going to work on the Z axis. I'm actually going to slightly drag this up, and you see that it's not only dragging 1 point up, it's dragging a unit of points up according to, it's actually creating some sort of elevation within my space. That's exactly what I want. So this is the fall off. If I just hit Control Z a bit, the amount of pinch, just to show you that again, if I increase this, it's actually centering. If I just hit W again, I've increased my pinch amount. It's making more of a peak. It's centering that magnet along only one unit, and it sort of weakens as it goes out. So you're going to get more mountain-like effects. Hit Control Z again. Take this peak, this pinch down to 0. If the bubble is the opposite, it's actually going to increase the weight of the points from the center vertices. If I drag this Z up, it makes a sort of an acne pimple bubble thing. It's kind of awkward, but that's what it does. And you can see this also displayed within this curve, this sine curve right here. So I'll hit Z again, zero out my bubble. Good things to play with on your own time. Okay. Another way to use soft selection is to actually go into your selection mode. And I can select this spray can here, and I can say select a number of points and affect a large range of my terrain at once. Okay, so by clicking and spraying, and I can drag these up. Oops, sorry. Select a number of points, as I did with the spray can, in my selection region. And if I hold alternate and I simply drag my Q, drag only the Z up, you see I'm dragging up quite a few points at once. And sometimes that's pretty useful for freeform modeling. And it's actually nice to use the spray can, because when we're in the real world and you say walk outside your front steps or you walk to a local park, not every bit of terrain is uniformly sloped. So maybe it's a great idea to, as you take a walk down the street, maybe you're running to get lunch, maybe you're walking to your car, take a look at the terrain. And even on relatively flat segments of, your city or wherever you're living, there might be some delineation between how the earth has been placed and how it's eroded and how the rain has affected it. So, maybe paying attention to those details. You see there's quite a little bit of rippling along these hills that I've painted in with the spray can. Maybe there's a bit of erosion and a bit of how water's fallen through a hill in your local neighborhood or something. All of these details really play into how we end up modeling things within computer space, within three-dimensional space. We're simply trying to be good observers of the world around us so that we can create more effective models, or so that we can create more realistic imagined models, or more abstract worlds that seem to be convincing. There's no real visual style that's correct. It's just a matter of paying attention to detail That detail is really crucial. So let's say back to the demo, back to soft selection. I can select Q to get out of that entire move command. I can just select outside of the plane. And now you see I've got a bit of terrain here. And I can, in theory, repeat that process. I can select, any vertices I have here. I could select a range of vertices, move them up a bit, hit Q to get out of that. And maybe when I'm finished, I can just scroll back into my sub-object rollout, unclick use self-selection, sort of get out of that. And I have more of a, have unselect my vertices, and now I have maybe a more believable world space. So hopefully this has been helpful. We've got two different ways of modeling some basic primitives. One by using soft selection to model planes or any object in a more freeform way, it's an editable poly really, but it appears as a plane. And the other is by also converting a box to an editable poly, but by using the chamfer, the loop, the ring, and the connect command to really punch out some very hard-edged geometry to create more architectural forms. Both of these are great tools and great building blocks for creating your models and your animations, and I really encourage you to expand on that and to develop those within the next project. So hopefully this has been helpful, and looking forward to seeing you in class. Thanks so much.